Hey, my name is Brian Fisher here with iZotope, and in this two-part series, I'm going to be talking about recording and repairing acoustic guitar and vocals. In this first video, we're going to be talking about the capture side of things, and I'm going to be sharing a few tips on how to get a good sound in a home studio environment when you're recording acoustic guitar or when you're recording vocals. Okay, so let's start off first with getting a great sound on acoustic guitar. The first thing I want to talk about is type of microphone. In general, I would recommend using a condenser microphone. I have two here, a small diaphragm and a large diaphragm condenser mic. Either of these can work great on acoustic. Typically, I'm going to be using a larger diaphragm condenser mic because they do a better job at picking up kind of the fullness of the acoustic guitar and the low end. But both of these give you exceptional sensitivity and clarity to capture the high frequency detail of an acoustic guitar. And that's why I would typically go with a condenser mic. If you only have a dynamic mic, for example, like the Shure SM57, definitely don't discount it. Feel free to try it out. It gives you a little bit more of a gritty kind of mid-range forward sound that doesn't have the same kind of airy or sparkly high frequencies, but in some mixes it can actually sound really good, and it has been used on a ton of records to record acoustic guitar. For the purposes of this video, I'm only going to be talking about recording guitar with one microphone and not getting into talking about stereo configurations for the sake of simplicity. Here's a sound sample comparing a dynamic microphone versus a condenser microphone on acoustic guitar. All right, so let's talk about mic placement. So the first place I always try miking an acoustic guitar is right at the 12th fret where the neck meets the body and about 12 to 14 inches out in front of the guitar. This gives you a really nice, natural, balanced sound, and you can angle a little bit towards the sound hole if you want to get more low end and more straight on if you want a bit of a thinner sound on the acoustic guitar. But you can kind of move around in this zone, and this is really a sweet spot that, 9 times out of 10 is going to work great and give you a nice kind of intimate, balanced sound. If you go farther than 14 inches, you might run into getting a little bit too much room ambience and kind of echo in your recording. But feel free to experiment kind of what fits the track best. Another method that you can try is the over-the-shoulder method. So actually placing the microphone right over the guitarist's shoulder, kind of right where your ear is. So the idea is to mimic how you naturally hear the acoustic guitar while you're playing it. One thing I've noticed is it can sound a little bit more distant and roomy. So I don't like to do that method as much for finger-picked guitar as much as maybe strumming. But again, you can make the decision for yourself. I'll show you a couple sound samples of both mic positions. All right, the next thing I want to talk about is recording levels and file types. So typically I set the gain on my interface preamp so that the loudest peaks of the audio are hitting maybe around -12 or -14 dB. Some people like to go even as low as -18, but you just want to make sure in general you have plenty of headroom and no chance of clipping on the way in and ruining your performance. I always record at 24-bit and 44.1 kilohertz for the sample rate because it gives me more than enough dynamic range to work with and frequency range to work with while taking up less storage space. Okay, some additional tips for recording acoustic guitar in a home studio environment. Pay attention to room acoustics. Maybe record in a room that has a lot of soft furniture or even put up some blankets on mic stands. That can be an easy way to create a kind of DIY baffle. You just want to reduce flutter echo and kind of room reverberation that can get into your recording. Another tip is to be aware of your environment and environmental noise. So that could be fans or air conditioners or, oftentimes neighbors upstairs. I try to really pay attention in my apartment to kind of when the most quiet times of day are to record and take advantage of that. And, when that doesn't work out, luckily we have tools like RX9 and we can fix a lot of that. One last tip is to make sure to take time to test out recording in different locations, recording with different mics, recording with different mic positions. Doing this experimentation can be a bit tedious, but ultimately it's going to give you much better results if you're able to test out and try different ways of recording and figure out what works best. So I'm going to record some acoustic guitar now using my large diaphragm condenser mic and kind of the 12th fret position. For the purposes of demonstration, I'm going to actually turn on an air purifier so we have a little bit of environmental noise that we can remove later with RX. But here we go. All right, now let's move on to talking about getting a good vocal sound. First off, mic choice. A lot of the same principles are going to apply for vocals as acoustic guitar. Again, my first choice for most people, including myself, is probably going to be a condenser microphone, particularly a large diaphragm condenser microphone. It's going to be able to pick up the low frequencies and the kind of high frequency detail in my voice with exceptional clarity. That said, I have used dynamic microphones. I have used small diaphragm condenser microphones as well. It really depends on the song. Particularly if you're doing something like rock or, a genre that doesn't really need those airy, sparkly, high frequencies in the voice, but instead needs more of a kind of aggressive mid-range presence. Dynamic microphone can actually be a great fit. If you have multiple options, I recommend trying all of them and seeing what fits on your voice. Keep an open mind because you might end up being surprised for a certain song, kind of what mic you end up choosing. Okay, so for mic placement, you want to be about 10 to 12 inches in front of the microphone. That's going to capture a nice balanced sound that has a nice full low end without too much proximity effect. Basically, you get exaggerated low frequencies as you move closer to the microphone. Typically, 10 to 12 inches is a good bet to get a nice kind of balanced tone that doesn't have too much of the room ambience in it either. For recording levels, similar to with guitar, you're going to be wanting kind of the maximum peaks hitting around -12, -14 dB to make sure you have plenty of headroom and you don't risk clipping. All right, so the room that you're in makes a big difference on your vocal recordings. You really want to make sure that you're not in a space that's too echoey. Even in this room, it's definitely not perfect, but I have kind of an acoustic treatment baffle right in front of me and some, DIY acoustic absorbing panels on the walls. If you don't have any of that, what you can do is make sure you're in a room that has, soft furniture or rugs or big drapes, stuff that can help absorb the sound and reduce the echo. Ideally put something right in front of you behind the microphone that can sort of absorb and diffuse, the loudest frequencies coming straight from your mouth before they have a chance to bounce around the room and get back into your microphone. Another tip, just like the guitar, is to make sure that you are singing at a time when there's not other ambient noise happening around you. Make sure air conditioners and fans are turned off. Make sure your neighbors aren't running around. Record at times when you know the apartment or house will be quiet. Again, I'm going to break the rules and have my air purifier on while I sing so I can show you how to remove those kinds of ambient noises later. All right, the last tip I have for you is to use a pop filter. Now, this helps block the bursts of air that you get from consonants like P's and B's, and avoids, getting that big low frequency spike that can sometimes cause even like distortion or clipping on the way in. Pop filters also help you, make sure that you're not getting too close up on the microphone. They kind of keep you a consistent distance away. For the purposes of this video, I'm actually not going to be using a pop filter when I sing, just so I can show you basically how bad, plosives sound and how you can get rid of them with RX. All right, so let's jump into recording an actual take. I wonder what you're doing now. I wonder if you ever made it work somehow. It's hard to hold on to a dream, and harder to watch it fall apart at the seams again. I wish you could travel in time, see yourself in the larger design. Okay, that's it. I've got my acoustic guitar and vocals recorded, and we're ready to move on to the next step. So keep an eye out for the next video where I'll open them up in RX9 and we'll look at what needs to be polished before we move on to the mixing stage. Thanks again for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.